Chapter 25. The Third Planet.
They'd hardly cleared Delta V's gravity when a wave of Council interceptors closed in on them. Zentran powered Nebulon space cruiser directly at their formation. Only one interceptor managed a laser blast before the cruiser was amongst them. The interceptors now had the problem of firing on each other when aiming at the cruiser. As Zentran weaved his way through them, he noticed that Nebulon's cruiser had no mandatory Council acceleration limiter and laughed. Still in their pressure suits, they hurriedly strapped themselves in for a light jump. Zentran specified an arbitrary course, arced beyond light speed. The velocity was way in excess of the Council's legal limit. He engaged execute without verifying the coordinates. The cruiser's computer grappled to calculate safe proximity to solid matter that might be in their path. The changing variables introduced by Zentran's evasive maneuvers prolonged the computed result. He held the craft steady for a moment, enough for the computer to calculate and lock onto a safe course. In a flash of light, they were gone. Time passed slowly. They breathed deeply and deliberately to dispel their tension. At the mercy of the cruiser's computer, they rested while it checked and rechecked the course for uncharted objects and tolerances in the drives. In silence and apparent slow motion, they climbed out of the pressure suits. The duration of the light jump had almost elapsed before they felt relaxed enough to laugh. They cheered as the full force of the drives slowed the cruiser down. There was no tracking equipment that Zentran knew of that could follow their course. It would even take him a while to work out where they were. They were still within the charted galaxy, but their remote position would not bring Council policing. Planets of the nearest inhabited solar system revolved around an old yellow star. According to the cruiser's computer, the third planet from the star supported life, but was inhabited by savages. The fourth planet had once supported life, but everything had been wiped out by an atomic war. The planet remained a desert with virtually no atmosphere.
I've heard of the third planet,
mentioned Nebulon.
It was once colonized by the inhabitants of the 10th planet. Now the crossbred slaves they created have been abandoned to their own savage devices. The souls occupying the crossbreeds are the banished criminals and nonconformists. They war relentlessly against each other, intent it would seem on destroying themselves.
Zentran decided to put the cruiser down on the fourth planet from the yellow star. They badly needed rest. On nearing the planet, though, he veered away.
There's something very wrong with that planet. I'd rather put down on the third planet.
What about the savages?
Asked Venru.
We don't have any quarrel with them, and they have no way of damaging the cruiser.
Nebulon's sleek craft slid through the atmosphere. Avoiding what seemed to be the planet's main activity area, they landed on an island towards the north. Tired to the point of exhaustion, and with the cruiser resting in a field of green grass, the four slept like the living dead. How long Zentran slept, he had no idea. He dreamt of running in slow motion through the emerald fields outside. Fora ran next to him hand in hand, clad in a virtually transparent, flowing light green negligee, matching the countryside. She raised her other hand, holding aloft the heart-shaped shell she'd given him. He awoke wishing he hadn't, and tried to hold on to the dream's splendor. He felt around his neck. The shell was still there, and the reed supporting it had become leathery. The other three still slept. Venru's head rested on Zack's chest as they lay together. Her hand rested on his shoulder, where she tapped a rhythm before sleep had claimed her. Outside, he sensed activity. Moving out of his body, Zentran found himself amongst a group of primitive men surrounding the cruiser. Their faces and bodies were painted with a blue dye. Another large group of men were attempting to haul an enormous elongated rock on rollers cut from tree trunks without much success. Lines of men with ropes tried to bring it to the cruiser. Their purpose, it seemed, was not to use it as a battering ram to damage the cruiser. In an adjacent field, an array of similar rocks were arranged so that their elongated shapes pointed towards the sky. Similar rocks were spanned horizontally on their uppermost edges. They were far too large for these people to have arranged in this manner. There was also no quarry nearby. Someone with considerable mental strength could have placed the megaliths, but it was more likely done using a starship's tractor beams. Zentran initiated the cruiser's drives and lifted the craft gently off the ground. Zack stirred as Zentran guided the craft quietly to the obelisks in the adjacent field. He smiled as he sat down next to Zentran at the controls.
Do you really think that's been built to house a starship?
According to the primitives outside, it's to honor one. It's a kind of religion.
Zentran set the cruiser down inside the circumference of obelisks. The disc-shaped cruiser fitted closely. Zack laughed.
Amazing.
Nebulon had told them that the inhabitants of this planet were warring savages. Observing them firsthand, they certainly looked the part. Long matted hair hung in disarray on battle-scarred and blue-dyed bodies. This was a heavy gravity planet, and the savages were strong and vicious. If the large rocks were to fall onto the edges of the cruiser with this kind of gravity, they would cause a considerable impact.
Could they damage the cruiser?
The alloys of the cruiser's hull are designed to withstand the stress of space and light speed. Even these large rocks would be of little consequence.
Zentran and Zack's interest turned to the savages' activity. They'd changed direction in hauling the rock and were endeavoring to bring it to where the cruiser now stood. Given their meager implements, the task would never be accomplished, regardless of resourcefulness.
Let's give them a hand,
thought Zentran.
Yes.
Confirmed Zack. The dyed men became more inspired as the unmanageable rock lifted into the air. It seemed to have taken on a life of its own. The men outside bore a similar degradation to Qutons on Delta 4b. Zentran instilled calmness to alleviate their fear of the unknown force supporting the megalith. With excited communication in their unusual dialect, they coordinated their efforts in bringing the airborne rock to the outer perimeter of the field where the cruiser now rested. They left it aligned so that the rising sun cast a long shadow pointing towards the cruiser. Inside the cruiser, Nebulon and Venru woke. Zack beckoned them to the window. The men outside gathered around the stone pillars encircling the cruiser. They bowed down in unison. A loudly chanted anthem followed, the like of which Zentran had never expected from such a primitive race. Its impact would be a chilling deterrent to any warring enemy as it echoed between the hills. But this was no war cry. The tribute intended for the Star Travelers ended with the dyed men thrusting both arms up, with outstretched fingers pointing at the sky. It indicated from where the visitors had come in their fiery chariot. The men knelt with their heads touching the ground. They didn't move. They'd been visited before, and this was their way of paying homage. The sun had risen higher in the sky, shortening the shadow cast by the elongated rock. Colorful birds winged their way through the morning air. Some alighted on nearby trees with emerald leaves fluttering in the breeze. In the distance, a brown-spotted deer peered curiously through the long grass at the silver craft, while others stooped to drink from a mirrored lake. The water reflected white clouds against the blue backdrop of sky. This certainly was a beautiful planet. Zentran turned away from the window's wondrous spectacle and looked at Venru.
Could you give me the music notes of the anthem the men outside chanted?
Certainly.
Venru considered the melody's relative intervals.
The impact is derived from its simplicity, with their combined numbers channeling the dedication as one.
Venru wrote down the notes of the chant, imagining the response achievable if played on a Votron. She handed the neatly written writing form to Zentran. Foremost in her mind was what in the universe could Zentran do with it? Zack was also curious. Sometimes he didn't understand Zentran at all. Zentran recalled a table he'd once seen with music notes and their associated vibration frequencies. He concentrated on recalling the corresponding values to the notes Venru had written down. He added the frequencies next to the notes. Sitting down at the spacecraft's controls, Zentran initiated one of the drives. He lifted the silver disc off the ground and held it above the stone columns. Then he powered up 2 more drives. He put those into opposite thrust so that the power of one cancelled the other. Adjusting their revolution speeds to the frequency of the chant's first note, he increased power. The ground shook with the force of the drives working against each other. He cycled through the frequencies by adjusting the drive's revolution speeds, giving a thunderous rendition of the chant to those outside. On the ground, the blue-dyed men stood erect, mesmerized, hearing their chant emulated by the resounding drives of the spacecraft. Zentran raised the cruiser more, increased the thrust of the opposing drives, and beckoned to Venru. She'd observed the process with interest. With the opposing drives resonating more intensely, she cycled through the listed frequencies with the art of a musician. Standing around the stone columns, listened in astonishment and spontaneously stamped their feet to the rhythm of Venru's rendition. Few beings in any star system would ever witness such a performance. As the starship ascended slowly above the raised arms and pointed fingers, men chanted in unison with the thunder of sound textures Venru produced with the spacecraft's drives. Fingers remained pointed at the starship, while they stood as motionless as the megaliths. They didn't move till long after the silver disk disappeared as a dot into the blue sky. It befitted their respect,
We should connect this up to a Votron.
said Venru half-jokingly.
Those people have been visited before.
Zentran was pensive.
I wonder what's been going on there.
They all wondered. Nebulon broke the silence.
I seem to recall from my childhood, or perhaps a prior childhood, that the colonies brought into existence on this planet were intended as miners to extract the planet's minerals, which had become too labor-intensive for the initiators. They chose a native ape-like man, strong and well adapted to the planet, of the ground. Interbreeding with themselves, in their likeness, assured greater intelligence to carry out instructions. Although their intelligence was purposely limited, and to acquire knowledge for personal enhancement was made a high crime, the situation got out of hand. It is said that a crossbreed woman first chose to advance herself, eat from the tree of knowledge. Others followed, causing work disruption. The initiators then tried to annihilate them with a flood, I think, and abandoned the planet. Many crossbreeds survived though, but with hostile traits. Thus they continued to war on each other, bent on self-destruction.
Interesting story. But there must be good amongst them as well. The good always outnumbers the bad.
Zentran was pensive again.
Could be, I suppose.
Zack displayed mild interest, although he had none. Zentran's preoccupation didn't go amiss.
What?
Asked Zack.
Fora. I should never have left her behind. Besides, we need her now. I have to go back for her.
Zack nodded and smiled.
She's agreed to forego the delay of the ceremony.
Zack nodded again.
At last.
He was thoughtful for a moment.
We should make it a double ceremony.
Venru heard, but then wasn't sure she had. She looked at Zack as he turned to her in a boyish manner.
Would that be all right with you?
She realized that she must have heard correctly. Moving to Zack, she put her arms around him and nestled the side of her head against his chest. Zack held her tightly and smiled at Nebulon.
Do I have your permission, sir?
It suddenly occurred to Venru that she should have answered Zack.
Yes.
Came from father and daughter in unison. They laughed. The troubles of the Nancom Confederacy seemed once again to be far away at that moment.
We should probably lie low for a lot longer, but I'm rather anxious to fetch Fora right away. If it's all right with you, I'll drop you off on one of the outlying planets. Perhaps you might like to spend some time on Tranor. I'm sure Venru's foster family would like to see Venru again and meet Zack and Nebulon. Their son is a flight engineer. What's his name, Venru?
Volfar. Yes, they would be thrilled to see all of us.
Zack became thoughtful.
I should go with you, Zentran. Things could get nasty and you might need my help. Reunions with families and long-lost friends who I don't know are not my idea of fun. I'll miss Venru, but we can all meet up later for our joint ceremonies. Going back with you to fetch Fora, and even the score with the council is overdue and much more my style.